Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Grief is an emotion universally associated with loss, but when it comes to the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship, its weight can feel especially heavy. In the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship, the heaviness of grief is not just a fleeting emotion, but a profound and complex experience. The interplay of shattered illusions, emotional complexity, loneliness, the absence of closure, and the task of rebuilding identity contributes to the weight survivors carry. Narcissistic relationships often leave individuals grappling with a plethora of emotions, making the journey to healing arduous and laden with emotional weight. In this video, we'll delve into the complexities of why grief is so heavy after enduring narcissistic abuse, and explore the unique challenges survivors face in their journey towards healing. To begin with, narcissistic relationships are where people get lost. In these toxic and unhealthy dynamics, you gradually lose touch with what you stand for, what matters to you, your sense of self, your principles, your priorities, values, and even your social connections. The influence of the narcissist's narrative permeates your understanding, and you may find yourself losing grasp of your own perspective on reality, which can be profoundly unsettling. You lose your sense of self, and that's a substantial loss to mourn. However, you might not even be fully aware that you're losing yourself. What you do recognize is that the entire relationship carries a weight of heaviness, sadness, and loneliness, which fills you with grief. And when it eventually ends, you grieve not just the end but also the time invested, the time lost, and the shattered hopes. It takes time to come to terms with the fact that you've lost all of this, and it's not like the grief when someone dies. The challenging aspect is that the narcissistic person is still alive, continuing with their life, interacting with your friends, sharing updates on social media, and perhaps even saying terrible things about you. Grief is a natural response to a loss, traditionally associated with death. However, it can also manifest in response to the loss of a relationship, such as through a separation or divorce. Grief can also manifest during significant life changes, like moving to a new city or country and leaving one's previous home behind. Grief is an inherent part of the human experience. We build rituals around grief, and every culture and religion has some sort of system for managing this emotional process. When grieving, we go through a phase called bereavement, and that's a part of grief. Bereavement is a natural part of the process of moving on or letting go, and during the bereavement period, people generally feel a sense of sadness. However, coping with the grief linked to narcissistic abuse poses a unique challenge, because, unlike typical bereavement, there's no physical death involved. The common belief that there should be a sense of relief when the toxic relationship ends is often present, but individuals still grapple with a profound sense of sadness. They typically undergo a mix of relief, grief, anger, and confusion. It's a prolonged and dragged-out process of grief, and allowing time for this grief to unfold and work its way through you is essential, even though it's an uncomfortable experience. When going through narcissistic abuse, the grieving process encompasses various aspects. You mourn not only the envisioned or potential outcomes in the relationship, but also the loss of what you thought could have been. You are grieving the hope you had for that particular relationship, the time you may have lost to it, and the pieces of yourself you gave up to it. You're grieving your childhood, you're grieving the loss of trust in other human beings. You're grieving your lost opportunities, and the shattered ideals about what life and love could have been. You mourn the loss of your belief in a fair and just world, and that's a substantial grief to navigate. If you went through narcissistic abuse during childhood, even though you might not have fully understood it at that time, it was grief that was woven into your experiences. A childhood with a narcissistic parent can be chronically disappointing, primarily because the narcissistic parent prioritizes their needs above everyone else's. There might have been overlooked activities, missed deadlines, and neglected school events, essentially, a string of missed opportunities during childhood. Beyond these tangible losses, there's also grief linked to the impact on a vital developmental phase, which can lead to a pervasive sense of sadness permeating throughout one's childhood. A sense of melancholy is a common experience for those who have endured narcissistic abuse. It's a weight that remains with us, noticeable in the subtle sadness that often lingers beneath the smiles. Fellow survivors, who share a similar journey, can often recognize and understand this underlying hidden emotion. In adulthood, decisions around maintaining relationships with narcissistic parents can also become complicated. Their presence may trigger feelings of grief for the lost childhood and the desired connection you had hoped for with a parent, and the realization that such understanding or connection is unlikely to materialize now. The persistence of gaslighting and passive-aggressive remarks continues to characterize your relationship, creating a recurring cycle where you replay the grief each time. Regrettably, these patterns also manifest in your adult relationships, such as with a partner or spouse, where the dynamics closely resemble those with a narcissistic parent. Despite the misery experienced in such relationships, there is always a tendency to grieve it when they come to an end. The grief elements of narcissistic abuse often parallel the emotions associated with depression and other aspects of such abuse, feelings of sadness, regret, confusion, and anger, resulting in various negative emotional states. However, the perplexity lies in the persistent yearning that can still be present concerning the past relationship. This is a common aspect of narcissistic abuse, and it can be quite confusing. When a relationship concludes, people often misinterpret the grief they experience, thinking they may have made a mistake and can somehow revive the connection. Bear in mind that much of a narcissistic relationship unfolds in your head. There is a tendency to persuade yourself that things were better than they actually were, and you might actually begin to believe this distorted version of reality, leading to grief over the narrative you have constructed in your mind. Consequently, there is always a risk of falling back into the same unhealthy dynamics. Odds are that the yearning or grief you are feeling or experiencing is for things that either never existed in the relationship, or it was probably the fantasy you had constructed about the relationship, or it was related to the trauma bond and the addictive compulsion to get back into the relationship, and neither of those patterns are healthy. Keep in mind that grief is a natural process that tends to resolve over time, especially when there is sufficient support in place. So, what do you do in the face of grief? Firstly, acknowledge that grief is a natural part of the letting go process. Seek support through therapy or support groups, preferably those tailored for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Additionally, consider employing techniques like mindfulness, meditation, and engaging in meaningful activities in your life. Secondly, don't let the grief confuse you. It's not an indication that you did the wrong thing, rather, it's a natural part of the letting go process, and in the case of narcissistic abuse, a distinctly heightened and intricate process. Thirdly, if the grief begins to escalate into more pronounced symptoms of depression or anxiety, it is essential to be attentive and seriously consider therapy. Recognizing and addressing negative emotional symptoms like depression and anxiety early on is crucial. It's advisable to consult your primary healthcare provider for guidance. Fourth, I recommend embracing journaling as a beneficial practice, to observe the gradual process of releasing yourself from this relationship. There will undoubtedly be both good days and bad days, moments of triggers, and easier days. However, tracking the improvement over time can reinforce your commitment to personal growth and letting go. Fifth, there are no genuine opportunities for do-overs or a reset button in life, so acceptance becomes key. Reflecting on a childhood that may have been marred by narcissistic abuse or on decades spent in a toxic marriage can undoubtedly be painful. And ruminating on the past won't bring that time back. But a significant aspect of overcoming grief is embracing acceptance. Remember, your life story is uniquely yours, it's rich and it's beautiful, and surviving narcissistic abuse has undoubtedly imparted valuable lessons and made you so much more stronger. Harness that strength and make the most of the time ahead of you, view it as a gift and use it well. While the process of grieving can be complicated, especially when leaving a narcissistically abusive relationship, recognize that grief is an integral aspect of the journey of surviving, enduring, and experiencing narcissistic abuse. As always, there's an ironic paradox that individuals healing from narcissistic relationships may encounter. Many of you are likely familiar with the loneliness that accompanies these experiences. Even when still in these relationships, and especially if you are still in them, these relationships can be profoundly lonely. It's challenging for individuals to find support or engage in conversations with others who can truly comprehend and understand what you are going through, further intensifying the feeling of loneliness. In narcissistic relationships, there is a pervasive sense of isolation and shame that can create distance between you and your friends or family. This isolation may result from your reluctance for them to witness the dynamics of your relationship, or could be due to receiving negative information about these individuals, causing you to avoid seeing them. Alternatively, your friends may have distanced themselves to avoid witnessing or hearing about your ongoing struggles. Another possibility is that you might lack social confidence due to prolonged criticism or rigid self-monitoring, possibly stemming from frequent remarks that you appear or sound foolish. The sense of isolation persists, and if you actually manage to exit a narcissistic relationship, you might find that it is also challenging, because now you have a heightened awareness of the world around you. You have become more aware of the patterns around you that exhibit narcissistic traits, that are invalidating and have gaslighting vibes and all of that. If you really listen, the underlying themes that might have escaped your notice before start becoming unmistakably clear. As a result, your social circle may not only shrink, but you might also become more discerning about allowing new people into your life, and this shift, I think, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, this relates to the concept of discernment, which is essential to healing from narcissistic abuse, since there's always a likelihood of repeating these narcissistic relationship cycles. It is important to recognize these toxic dynamics and avoid them. Give yourself the space to step back and refrain from immediately throwing yourself in and try to make things right. From what I've noticed in survivors, particularly when these relationships end, they often spend a considerable amount of time alone. And paradoxically, in that time alone, they actually feel much better and stronger. Intriguingly, even those who are extroverted may actually find that they feel most at peace when they're alone. During these moments, they feel they can genuinely relax and be their true authentic selves, without the need to be constantly vigilant or fear judgment, and that makes sense, especially considering the dynamics that often transpire in a narcissistic relationship. During those moments, your nervous system can relax, alleviating the constant tension of not having to be on edge, allowing you to breathe and just be yourself. Think of it as akin to putting a sprained ankle up to promote healing. Then, there comes a day when they begin to socialize, perhaps at larger gatherings or by meeting new people. Many individuals often express that they find it somewhat unsettling to be around others during this phase, because there is now a complete shift in the environmental dynamics. No more of those insensitive remarks, those gaslighting experiences, and the arduous journey you've been through. This might create a sense of progress in your healing and growth after leaving the challenging relationship. However, when you re-enter social situations after a period of solitude, the contrast of not experiencing daily gaslighting can suddenly make it feel quite unsettling, like a setback in your healing. Bear in mind that it's not a setback, but it emphasizes how tenuous this process of healing is and how significant discernment can be. Now, for survivors of narcissistic relationships, if certain people were the cause of stress, frustration, disappointment, manipulation, criticism, and judgment, all of which are detrimental, the vigilance developed in response to these experiences might persist even after healing. Therefore, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that solitude is beneficial for the healing process. However, it can sometimes be complicated, because some survivors express a desire to spend time with others after being in these lonely and invalidating relationships for an extended period, which by all means is also a healthy inclination. However, what often happens for many survivors is that time spent with other people can actually feel more taxing and disconcerting. They may find themselves more on edge, engaging in heightened self-monitoring, being cautious about their words, and feeling vulnerable to being hurt by the offhanded comments from people who don't understand what you've been through. And it might not even be about you specifically, it could just be because of the negative attitudes of these people. Let me give you a couple of examples. For instance, if you're someone who is divorced or has exited a long-term committed relationship, and you find yourself amidst individuals who are being somewhat derisive and contemptuous. They may even make jokes like, "Oh, we never invite the divorced people to our dinner parties." Alternatively, someone might make comments like, "I definitely wouldn't want to be dating at my age," which can be hurtful. Another scenario is when someone reconnects with old friends after a significant period of time, especially since exiting a particular relationship, and finds that their lives are quite different than yours. They may have stable and healthy marriages, serving as a reminder of what you currently lack in your life. These experiences can be draining, and I'm certain many of you can think of numerous other examples. Going through narcissistic abuse and emerging on the other side is an isolating experience, something that most people fail to comprehend. They often think of it as typical family dynamics, allowing that families can be complicated and relationships are hard. But based on what you've been through, and certainly I know, it's a lot more than that. This is precisely why moments of solitude are not just important, but crucial for survivors. This is probably the reason why you find those alone times easier, or might even crave them. The crucial aspect of the healing process is individuation, where you finally allow yourself to fully embrace and be your authentic self. It's that idea of being authentic, no longer feeling the need to restrain your true self or compromise your essence to make your relationship work. As you lean into and heal within that more authentic state, you become more adept at discerning and cease living your life in the unbalanced state of persistent self-blame and self-doubt. However, to accomplish this, you'll require extended periods where you can simply embrace being yourself, and this is often most effectively achieved by spending some time alone. One of the greatest wounds I observe in people who have survived narcissistic relationships is the self-blame. People berate themselves, questioning how they could have been so foolish, why they didn't recognize the signs earlier, and labeling themselves as idiots for allowing the narcissistic person to manipulate them. Alternatively, there's a tendency for individuals to question if they didn't put in enough effort, blaming themselves for the potential shortcomings. Some might even believe that it was their fault, suggesting they became emotionally distant towards the end of the relationship. Others may internalize a sense of neediness, thinking they are responsible for pushing the narcissistic person away. Over the years, I have heard every self-blaming statement from people in narcissistic relationships. It is unfortunate that narcissism isn't a mandatory subject in high school. This information is not part of the curriculum, so there's no reason how you could have been aware of it. So, forgive yourself for not seeing and recognizing it, for not understanding the potency of these trauma bonds, for confusing empathy with enabling, and for making excuses you didn't know. Self-forgiveness is a key element of self-compassion, and it goes beyond that. Self-forgiveness involves releasing ourselves. When we withhold forgiveness from ourselves, we remain stuck and continue to inflict mental punishment on ourselves. You get so baked in these narcissistic relationships that you start to believe it, and it shapes your identity. Release yourself of this toxic relationship. As long as you keep playing it out in your head, you are still in it. Severing those unseen ties that bind you means forgiving yourself. Reflect on your past actions and reassure yourself that you did nothing wrong. Perhaps that is the essence of your self-forgiveness. Understand the nature of these narcissistic relationships and liberate yourself from this thinking, and that is a huge step forward in your healing journey. And this matters even if you're still in the relationship, considering that many individuals may find it challenging to leave. If leaving is not an option, it becomes even more important to forgive yourself and understand the reasons behind your decision to stay. The truth is, by forgiving yourself, you initiate the process of breaking free from the cycle where you erroneously hold that you're somehow to blame. Reintroduce yourself back to your life. Allow yourself to fully engage in the simple joys, laugh out loud, indulge in silliness, and most importantly, be fully present in your own life. After coming out of narcissistic relationships, we require some time, whether it's a short period, a month, a year, or even several years, to reacquaint ourselves with who we truly are, shedding the constant vigilance and edginess, no longer waiting for the criticisms, and reaching a point where we cease caring about others' opinions. Special occasions, or red letter days, whatever you call them, are often tumultuous with narcissistic individuals. They often find a way to spoil these days for everyone, express disappointment, or let you down. Reclaim these days for yourself, and resist any attempts at manipulation or hoovering on those occasions. Celebrate these occasions, whatever they may be, either with friends or on your own. Establish new traditions, perhaps by embarking on a trip you've always wanted to take. Enduring the first year of these dates, these anniversary milestones, as they were, enhances your resilience. Embrace life, and show kindness to yourself. You spent enough of your life believing that your self-worth is derived from what you do for others. Understand that true meaning and purpose lies in living in harmony with your authentic self, and not in navigating through life conforming to the whims, follies, demands, and unreasonable needs of others. Reconnect with your true self. And live authentically, and that's enough meaning and purpose for a lifetime. Surviving a narcissistic relationship requires immense strength and resilience. Celebrate your courage and perseverance in breaking free from a toxic cycle. Recognize the growth and newfound wisdom that have emerged from the challenges you've faced. Remember, your journey is unique, and the path to recovery is a personal one. Be patient with yourself, and embrace the opportunity for growth and self-discovery on this post-narcissistic relationship expedition. So, I hope this helps you. If this content was helpful, please consider sharing and subscribing to my channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Always feel free to share your experiences in the comment section below. I express my gratitude to everyone for tuning in and watching. Let us help spread the awareness and lead healthier and fulfilling lives.